All right. Hi, my name is Wren Newman, and this is my project on the Cownose ray touch tank. So, some basics of the biology of Cownose rays. There are a species of elasmobranch, which is a group of cartilaginous fish that includes sharks, rays, and skates. And their species name is Rhinoptera benessis. They're a migratory species. They specifically migrate from around the Chesapeake Bay area down to the Gulf of Florida, but they can be seen as far south as Northeast South America. They are seabed foragers. They rustle up some sand and look for bivalves to eat and chomp down on with their specialized teeth. They have three distinct stages: adolescent, juvenile, and adult. And based off of which stage they're in, they have different preferences. So as they get older, they prefer more and more saline water, and their preferences change as well. When they are an adolescent or an adult, they prefer shallower water, and when they are a juvenile, they prefer deeper water. They have a toxic spine end they use for defense. It has been referred to as being similar to getting stung by a wasp if you get stung yourself. They are predated by larger elasmobranchs, which include just like your common Atlantic shark species, bull sharks, hammerhead sharks. They are also predated by the cobia fish. They are social, generally in schools of 20 to 50, but when they're migrating, they can be found in schools in the 10,000s. There's a low diversity in their visual appearance, which makes it hard to identify individually without giving them some sort of external or internal tag. And they are finally active ventilators, which is really good for aquariums because they are not ram ventilators, so they can rest on a seafloor without any problems with breathing. All right, so now on to the basics of the aquatic enclosure design. For this design, we're going to have a 2-tank setup, which is pretty standard fare, a display tank, and a quarantine tank. The display tank is for the guests who view the animals and where the animals will spend most of their time. And the quarantine tank is where they will be situated when they first come into the aquarium, where they will go for monthly checkups and in case anything goes wrong with the tank or the individuals themselves. Each tank will be connected to a separate biomass filter, which will take out all of the waste products from the food and from the animals, as well as fixing any alkalinity issues and removing nitrates and nitrates. Both of the tanks will be constructed from concrete with a 4% rebar amount. The rebar will be coated with waterproof coating to keep the rebar from getting in contact with the water and the chlorine, because that can cause it to corrode and cause the entire structure to fail, and we don't want that. In the actual enclosure itself, we're looking at a single age cohort, possibly followed by a second. The reason you want a single age is because rays tend to school and socialize by size and therefore also by age. And so if we want the rays to be able to socially interact with each other, they need to be around the same age. The reason we're considering the second one is because our touch tank is going to be a shallow tank, and juveniles tend to not like shallower water as much. And so we want to encourage rays to constantly be in the touch tank section of the design. So we might add in an extra cohort of rays once the initial rays get old enough where they prefer the deeper water for a bit. And also in the tank itself will be other aquatic life. This will include horseshoe crabs, blue crabs, other free-swimming fish that are smaller than the rays that you would find in the natural environment of Chesapeake Bay, as well as oyster reefs, which will be attached to these flow machines that we're going to be including in the design, and also vegetation in the form of eelgrass. So right here we have a 3-dimensional model and a 2D model of our tank design. So on the 3-dimensional model, you can see that it is a 3-part design. You've got a shallower end, a deeper end, and a gradient in between. The shallower end is going to be our touch tank side, while our deeper end is going to be our guest viewing side. So on the shallower side, the touch tank side, that will be where the rays will experience most of their feeding. Well, not most, all of their feeding, both from the guests and from the aquarium itself. So the guests will be feeding them little pieces of food throughout the day, but they will also be fed at sunrise and sunset in a manner that helps their natural inclinations. So we will be releasing bivalves and sometimes bits of crustaceans through different holes that are located in every location that is green on this screen. And the way that this is going to work is essentially you have an airlock of sorts that releases under the sand so that the rays can use their natural foraging behavior to get at their food. On the deeper end, this is where most of the vegetation is going to be located because we don't want the vegetation growing out of the tank or interfering with the guests. And so this will be the main setup of the viewing side. In between the deeper end and the gradient will be a current maker. This will function both as the intake and outtake of the water for it to go through filtration, but also will help create some fun migratory sensation for the rays that we'll discuss in a little bit. So the tank needs to be situated with the wider ends facing in north and south, and the shorter ends facing east and west, because of what we're going to be doing with migration patterns. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. Welfare-focused design aspects. Before we get into the current that I was hinting to, let's talk about a few other things. First things first, let's talk about the lights that change with seasons. So rays, like any other animal that is interacting during the day and interacting in an environment where you can actually see the sun, they have natural cycles influenced by both the 24-hour cycle as well as a yearly seasonal cycle. So just in case they would be thrown off by constant lights, we would like to try and introduce a natural cycle for them. With that, we will also be introducing real-time temperature and weather adjustments. There are points in Virginia Beach, which is right off Chesapeake Bay, and in Tampa, right where the rays migrate during the winter, that have constant weather and water temperature data freely available. So what we can do is, based off of where they would be in the seasons, during the summer and fall being in Chesapeake, and during the winter and spring around Florida, we can adjust the temperature according to our actual natural counterparts. And with that, I think another thing would be particularly fun for guests, while also possibly enriching for the rays, is introducing weather. This can include wind and rain, and can be adjusted and interpreted from data that we get from Virginia Beach and Tampa. So what is very important for rays that I noticed was severely lacking at the aquarium that I talked to was health checkups. And the problem with health checkups and Cownose rays is that Cownose rays, you have very little individualization, which means that you can't tell them apart very easily. So PIT tags are an expensive but extremely effective for elasmobranch tag. The reason they're so effective is because they can be put in internally, so they cause no external issues, and actually don't cause any internal issues either. And as far as internal tags, they don't need any battery source, they don't have any electricity generation. They are only activated when a certain signal is sent. And so this is very useful for identifying individual rays. And so, as I said, they would be getting monthly checkups. We could associate each ray with a day of the month, 1 through 30, or I guess 1 through 28, realistically, and just check them out each day of the week, or each day of the month. And now onto the current pumps, which I think is very exciting. So during the normal cycle, they will just be a light flow from the natural pumping that needs to be done through the system to reduce any bio waste. However, during migratory seasons, they will be flowing either north to south or south to north, corresponding to the opposite direction of where the rays would be going. So this is to allow for them to get out that extra energy and that migratory instinct if they have it. So when it is coming into winter and they'd be migrating south, the flow would be migrating north so that they could go against the flow. Finally, salinity will be slowly increased as the rays age to give them the right salinity for their proper age group. And also we will be introducing more crustaceans to their diet as they get older, as they tend to prefer more crustaceans in their diet as they get older. Finally, enclosure functionality to the public. So seeing as the ray tank's main draw is going to be the touch tank aspect of it, we need to deal with that situation. The rays will be introduced to humans through the aquarium employees and will be slowly introduced to being fed by humans and interacting with humans regularly for the couple months until they are ready to meet with the public. The reason we don't do that immediately is because the rays are probably going to be skittish around humans initially, and also the public is a lot more unpredictable than a bunch of aquarium employees. So along with the rays needing training, we also need to train the humans. So as guests come in, before they're actually let into the room that has the touch tank, they will need to go through a series of rules and regulations. This will include, one, that before they enter in, they're going to need to wash their hands, as their hands can contain bacterial pathogens that they can introduce to the water, and more riskily, directly to the skin of the ray, which can be extremely problematic, and not all touch tanks take that into mind. They will also be told how to interact with the rays, putting the food directly on the palm of their hands and holding it out underwater, as well as using the 2-finger rule and stroking down the back of the ray and not just grabbing rays or anything. And with that, there will have to be multiple aquarium employee attendants to make sure that the guests don't break any of these rules, because people are going to do that, unfortunately. Another thing would be trying to just tell them not to harass the rays. If they are clearly away from human contact, don't try and reach them. Don't yell, don't scream. We want to try and reduce any sort of problems that the rays could experience. On the other side, they will be able to walk down a ramp to view the view side of the tank. They will also probably get an okay view through the eelgrass to see humans touching the rays. And I think that'll be very exciting for them. So they will be in the same room, but they can flow around independent. So that is how the tank is going to function. One thing I also want to include is that while the functionality is set in stone now, in practice, we would want to go through a review process, especially with other aquarium employees, talking about how they see the rays interacting with humans and taking input on what we can do to improve the tank, not only for the guests, but especially for the rays. So that is the project as a whole. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thanks.